Shalom Aleichem. How are you doing, sir?
Good. How you doing? I was just listening to the debate, man. You're very articulate. You really took that guy out.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, sir. Like I said, I've been kind of in the shadows a little bit, but, we've taken some time to really go through things and, schooling and everything else. What he really doesn't realize is that I've studied the New Testament on the collegiate level, so I know every twist and turn that they want to kind of take.
Right.
So
you live in the state of Washington?
Well, I used to. I'm down in Texas now, so I just decided to keep the same phone number. My wife is from here in Texas, but we're military family.
All right.
So
you were in the Army?
That's yeah.
That was 11 Bravo.
Cool. 11 Bravo, 11 Bang Bang.
That's it.
That's all right. Well, I'm in the National Guard, and I had I was in charge of a plethora of different soldiers because we get soldiers from different MOSs. Back when I was in the Honor Guard. Now I'm in aviation, but it's kind of crazy because I'm sitting here and I'm in charge of 11 Bravos, tankers. I'm in a medevac company, and that's kind of unheard of in National Guard. I don't know, man. I'm just a weekend warrior. I do my civilian work during the week, even though I'm in uniform.
So what would you classify yourself? Like a Karaite Jew or?
Well, I classified myself as Jewish. As far as converting over to Judaism, that has been quite an issue with the military and everything else involved. Just because, when you have this revelation, especially halfway through your military career, and you're in Christianity and you're doing that a lot, and then boom, truth comes, and now you're starting to change things. It's a very long and gradual process.
Same here. I converted, but I first decided to convert when I was in the Army. So I had attended shul. The rabbi in Fort Bragg was actually probably like the most prominent Orthodox rabbi at that time. At that time, there weren't too many Orthodox rabbis. I even took the name Asher because it was the son of the chaplain, of the Orthodox chaplain on base.
Sure. But,
now you get kosher food in the commissary. But back then it was a little different. MREs, I guess, forced to eat vegetarian MRE.
Yeah, here and there, man. It's I'm still trying to get a kosher MRE. I've been trying to get those for years, and they're like, well, so sometimes I just go out of pocket, and then we'll pray to the Most High. Maybe they'll reimburse me. I don't know. But it's everybody's walk is a little bit different, and I've had some bumps in the road even coming to this understanding because I grew up in Christianity. And then the obvious progression, as I've talked to some Jews here in the community here in San Antonio, the obvious progression. Okay, Messianic Judaism. Okay, whatever. Then you kind of skip over to Karaite Judaism. And then, okay, Oral Torah, okay, now it makes sense. Now I've just wasted a bunch of time. It is what it is, but I'm glad that I've gone the route that I have because I learned a lot of esoteric knowledge on the way through. I learned how to talk to people, learned how to keep my mouth shut. I'd learned how to see all the best and the worst each group could offer. And that just kind of gives me quite of a rundown. And because of that, I have a little bit more patience and a little bit more mercy with people that I might be debating or what have you. So, I'm glad for that as well.
You're able to accept different opinions. Many people who are new to religion, they think that their path or the path they've adopted is the only path, and everyone who doesn't follow that path is condemned because they don't know. They don't know how much we really don't know. And really Judaism, as it exists today, is probably around 60 or 70% fluff. No, it's not a bad thing, but there's just a lot, even in the rabbinical world, that we don't know. Even the codifiers, like Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, there's many things that they fill in the gaps because the Talmud's not clear on. It doesn't tell you always which way to go. So they say, it seems to me it's this way. Right? Now, people, they build too much in that, saying, oh, well, if the Rambam says it's like if God said it. No. They took educated guesses, and sometimes even today, I would say that from an inspirational level, we're just like the Rambam and Rav Yosef Karo. I mean, these guys didn't have authentic smicha. I mean, these guys were just trying to do the best they could with the knowledge they had. I think these guys should be respected for what they know and not because they're some sort of demigod. Nowadays, they're elevated to almost a saint-like status. Right? I mean, many people, they go and they pray at their graves trying to impute redemptive qualities to a man.
And, really, a lot of that has to do with the fact of, the different captivities and the captivities or exiles, that Jews have found themselves in over the ages, whether that, Kabbalistic things that crept in or being around Christian spirituality or paganism, whatever it might be. A lot of those things we see other people doing this, so maybe we should implement it ourselves. So, it doesn't necessarily add to or take away from the Torah, certain traditions, or you can spiritualize Bereshit chapter 1, verse 1 all you want. I mean, it's not necessarily adding to or taking away from, but at the end of the day, I think the issue is the over-spiritualization of Scripture, not taking a more rational approach to it. And that's why, I was attracted to people like you, people like Rabbi Chaim and others who are talking a pretty straightforward approach. If you want to go in and look to more of a spiritual meaning or mystical meaning, then you can do that. For instance, my wife, when we came to this, it was so, how do I say, dry speak for her that it wasn't enough for her to see the significance of. So I said, why don't you look at some light Kabbalistic teachings, so some real light stuff, like a Rabbi Eylon Yisrael or something like that.
I wouldn't say that's light. I wouldn't say Rabbi Eylon is Rabbi Yisrael is light.
Well,
that's like overblown. He's probably the most outspoken Kabbalistic teacher out there. I'm not against Kabbalah, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know that.
It, but I make a distinction between binding halakha, binding Judaism, what's authentic oral law, and just a mystical twist to everything that is subjective, right? I mean, I categorize it just like I categorize any midrash, any agadah, folklore and legend. There's a lot of beautiful ideas in Kabbalah. There's a lot of silly ideas in Kabbalah. The problem is, nowadays, we don't just call it the Zohar, we call it the Holy Zohar. In other words, we've elevated it to the right side of Deuteronomy. And this is the problem, because if we're just going to introduce books into the canon, let's say, that were found 700 years ago, what's the limit? Why don't we just include the Book of Mormon? Why don't we just include the Quran? There's checks and balances. There's that script that we have to follow in order for Judaism not to destroy itself. Because if you keep on introducing new ideas and new books that are supposedly holy and binding, you're going to end up with a religion that you didn't start off with, right? And that can't happen. In other words, something can't destroy itself. So there are checks and balances. So in the way I teach it, the 5 books of Moses are the only divinely inspired texts that we could 100% rely on from an instructional basis. In other words, we have the books of the prophets and the writings, and it's fine, but those books are there to amplify the first 5 books. In other words, they can't introduce anything new. Right? They're supposed to point us back. Even the rabbis teach that if we never would have sinned, we would never have had any prophet sent to us, because the job of the prophet is to bring us back to Torah once we do sin. And the oral law is really nothing but the rulings of the court described in Deuteronomy chapter 17. Now, there are many tales and legends that appear within the Mishnah, within the Talmud itself, that tries to claim that these laws were also given on Mount Sinai. It's not bad to believe that, right? But it's not necessary to. Just like any other Agadah. There are other Midrashim that teach that the 7 laws were given, first 6 were given to Adam and the last one to Noah, right? You don't have to believe that. All you have to believe is the legal portion of it, that non-Jews are bound to it according to the Sanhedrin. In other words, the Sanhedrin adjudicates Gentiles living in the land according to these 7 laws. But people nowadays make no distinction between Agadah, Midrash, and actual binding halakha, and basically what one has to believe. So
and I think we're in total agreement with that. And like I said, and my wife, she's pretty sharp too. And I think we have a healthy idea of, okay, this rabbi says this or this precept says that. Let's look at that in terms of where the Torah is, And once you start saying silly things like the wife of Pharaoh's arm magically stretched 9 feet to grab Moses out of the water, then that's some weird stuff. So that's stuff that we do not necessarily have to believe in.
Right.
Yeah. So,
but mind you, most Orthodox Jews will give you a different rendition of what they think Judaism is. And I've spoken to many that believe that even what rabbis teach today is considered oral law and was initially given on Mount Sinai. It's silly, but we have to work through evolution, not revolution. In other words, many people, just because they happen not to see eye to eye with the greater Orthodox Jewish community, they go and break off, start their own movement, and completely nullify any effectiveness in their ministry. In other words, walking with God doesn't mean much if you're walking alone. There's strength in numbers, and the way we're going to make not just Judaism but the world better is by uniting with people that we at least agree 60% on, right? And we're never going to agree 100% with anyone. So this is what I tell the Karaites. The Karaites really have no influence. They're so fragmented. They really can't get along with each other because everyone tries to interpret Scripture on their own.
Yeah, and and really the branch of Messianic Judaism that come out of is the Hebrew Israelite movement, which is just so silly. And there's so much infighting, whether they're Tanakh only, which is a type of Karaitism, or they're Messianic. And there's just so much infighting, so much negativity, and then you add the racism, and then you've got this and that. They're okay. Well, this group baptizes, but this group doesn't, and then this group, believes that the Sabbath is on what the
lunar Sabbath
calendar says. Yeah, and you got the lunar. It just becomes a mess.
That's why the oral law is such a blessing.
Exactly.
I had a lady call me today telling me that she spoke to a teacher of Judaism. Later she told me he was a Karaite, but I already knew he was a Karaite after what he told her. He told her that it's okay for one's wife to take a lesbian lover, and it would be beneficial for the man to find a bisexual wife and have threesomes with this other woman, because as Karaites, they don't believe in an oral law. And if you go only by the written law itself does not prohibit lesbianism, but the oral law does. The oral law calls it derech hamori, hukasakom, it calls it things that happened in Egypt, and it prohibits it. Now, I'm not going to paint every Karaite with this brush, but this is what happens when you completely break away from any sane interpretation of Scripture. And the members of the court, of the Sanhedrin, had the authority to interpret and develop laws around their interpretations of Scripture. Now, mind you, they're rabbinic laws, but we're commanded to obey these man-made rabbinic laws. See, the problem that I have is with Jews making no distinction between rabbinic law and Torah law.
Exactly. And for people who are coming, who have a really big religious head, or who really just want to be what the Scripture states, and like I said, I agree. We agree with the oral law and everything like that. But sometimes people just need just down to earth explanation. So for me, what I've seen in my own life is that I had a lot of issues personally when I didn't abide by precepts such as Proverbs, I believe chapter 5, 4 and 6 talk about. Trust the Most High with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. And that's a mirror of what the Torah says, that you should not go out today as you do everyone doing whatsoever is right in his own eyes. And then when I was able to make that correlation with that precept of wisdom from Solomon, which is oral law, or an oral precept, and then to see it in the written Torah, and then it's like, oh man, now Deuteronomy 17 makes sense. This is serious. This is not just.
That's a good way to explain it. I mean, the writings are also considered, in that case, more like Pirkei Avot, an oral proverb, right? It's not necessarily binding. I mean, there's many things that the rabbis had a problem with, like Kohelet. Anyone who reads Kohelet, it sounds like it's just a breeding ground for heresy. There's always been a distinction made between man-made scripture and what we received at Har Sinai. And nowadays in the Orthodox world, that distinction is no longer made. Now, there are certain rabbis, like Rabbi David Bar Chaim, many in the Yemenite community, one could even say Josef Haor, who are trying to bring that back, but Judaism is just not receptive to it. And this is because of rabbis like you mentioned, like Alona Nava, this and that really dumb down Judaism. And if you look at the people who attend those lectures, well, first of all, I would say that Rabbi Dror and all these guys have more of a Christian audience than they do an Orthodox one. And they'd be surprised. I've seen pictures taken with them and people from the audience, and these are people who I know are Messianic. And it's fine. I consider Messianics Jews. They don't. They find Messianic Judaism disgusting, but they don't know a Kabbalistic rabbi will never be able to defeat a Messianic rabbi in a debate. The reason why is that the Messianic rabbi is just going to use Kabbalistic writings to justify Jesus, and you're able to do it. You're able to do it, and this is why I think they're not effective. Now, with me, I love debating because half the time I surprise them because they think that they could quote the Ramchal on the Zohar, and I'm going to accept it like if I just heard them quote Deuteronomy, right? And then I have to educate them and tell them, no, there are checks and balances, and there's a script we have to go by, right? And they're like, oh, no, they're here quoting the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they're yelling case closed. And it's not like that. Now, mind you, in the yeshivish world, people make a distinction between oral law, written law. People know between a Doraita and a Derabanan. In mainstream Jewish life, most people don't know. And I think it's the fault of the rabbis, because if people start educating their congregations properly, they'll lose power and probably lose their jobs, because they realize, we don't technically need a rabbi for anything, right? And if you're Sephardi, the cantors typically work as the rabbis themselves. But anyways.
Yeah. And I actually kind of see it here, actually, by the way. But
that they need rabbis nowadays is because of the Kiruv movement, because they need someone to cater to secular Jews. But in the old days, being a rabbi wasn't even an actual position. They didn't really get paid. They were just members of that community. And most rabbis today, they make $250,000 a year, right? Because the congregation needs them for everything.
So, obviously, that's another issue with conversion and things of that nature as well. I would say that my household, even though we haven't completely converted over, we keep many mitzvot here. And, since I'm in the military, we're moving around. I'm not in a Jewish eruv at this point in time. But we, go and do 10 different events and things of that nature. But, I want to be, shomer Shabbat as best as I can. So that would, prohibit me from driving from my house. And, people looking at me, where were you? I'm like, I don't know about you, but I don't, and this is Orthodox. These are Orthodox Jews. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I don't drive on, Shabbat. I don't. Mm-hmm. Oh, I do. I'm like, well, I don't. Right. So I don't get that.
You have to know that you're already Jewish. You're already in the covenant, even though you haven't converted. The conversion process is rabbinic in nature, with the exception of circumcision. One enters a covenant in their heart once they've decided to follow God and keep His commandments. However, the Jewish people can't know the desires of your heart, so they've developed this conversion process for you to go through, developed by the Sanhedrin, is binding 100%, but it's still man-made. So in other words, that's not what makes you Jewish. You're 100% Jewish now. It just has to be formalized. So, don't feel that you're not a Jew. And this whole Noahide movement, don't even think twice about that silliness.
No, I'm good on that. I'm studied up on that. Yeah, actually, your videos, I never even knew anything about that until you started making videos about it. I didn't know that exists. I've heard about the Noahides, but I didn't know there were actually, groups of people who
they're big congregated. In Central Texas, there's tons of them. There's Texas, Oklahoma, and they've gotten so big that many of them have begun to break away from Judaism. Like, I've had Noahides tell me that it's greater in God's eyes for one to be a Noahide than for one to be a Jew, because they've come to this belief that Abraham was a Noahide and Adam was a Noahide. It's all nonsensical. As a matter of fact, the Talmud equates Abraham with being a Jew. This whole thing about him being a Noahide is a pretty recent idea, just because they've gone contrary to what the Rambam advised. He said that Noahides are not allowed to create their own religion, that they either just stick to the 7 laws or they convert to Judaism.
Right.
But
every man doing what's right in his own eyes, and that is definitely against the Torah, and and every man need to include the Noahide. I would assume you can't have every man doing whatever they want to do. So like you said, it has to be.
Now, mind you, all these guys want to become Jewish ultimately. I mean, there's some that are happy being Noahides, and that kind of raises an eyebrow with me, just because there have been people in the past who have become Noahides because they're either sexual deviants, because there are things that the Noahide laws allow you to do that is prohibited for Jews to do. So I would question anyone who would choose to remain under some made-up status of only 7 laws, walking around thinking that God will only judge them against 7 laws and not anything more. It seems like that's in some way, especially if you're coming from an organized religion like Islam or Christianity, that's almost like a license to sin.
Right.
Because if they truly believe that they're only being judged against 7 laws, that many of them don't believe it. There's one opinion that it's 7 categories of laws, but that's also just opinion. Right? But there are many who believe that it's just 7 laws. If you truly believe that God only judges you against 7 laws, that opens the floodgates for inappropriate behavior. And people never really talk about this. But that being said, most Noahides that I've met, virtually every Noahide I've met, has really wanted to become Jewish, but as a reaction of not being able to join Judaism or the Jewish people, they become this, just not to be in limbo. Right? The problem is that this is really how Christianity began and how initial Christian Jewish persecution began. Paul was telling the Gentiles, you don't have to keep all of the Torah. You basically just have to keep around 7 laws. Now, he included the prohibition of fat, the consumption of blood, but it's the same idea. So what happened is that movement got so big that it detached themselves from the Jerusalem church, the Orthodox Messianic believers, one could say, and actually began persecuting them. But Jews don't see that. This is such a great opportunity to build up our numbers with people who really want to be a part of us. There's the stupid group and the dangerous group, and I belong to the stupid group. So.
Well, this is another question I've had for you, and I've actually been wanting to send a question into David Bar-Chaim on this issue, one of prayer. And when people come across your website and you break down how prayer is actually supposed to be performed, and in the Talmudic days, either they get like really excited, like me, and like, oh yeah, cool, I kneel and pray and know exactly what to say, and there's a prostration, here we go. But others, they look at that a lot, Jews and even Muslims, and say, oh, that's not, they're either imitating Muslims or imitating us, or they're taking some type of tradition that is, that we don't follow, and then I continue reading. I'm like, well, the sages said that even prostration by the nation of Israel would even colloquial terms bring about the Messiah. So this seems to be a very, very big deal that is kind of fallen out of practice. So it's kind of a, so when I look at that, what do you think about when people see that or and reject that? Because I've seen positive, I've seen negative.
Have you downloaded our Siddur?
Oh yeah, I've got that.
Okay.
The question is, and I do this palau in that way. I use a Tevani nusach at this point. I don't. That's kind of your Siddur is kind of a starter.
Right.
But yeah, at this point,
well, Siddur is actually a little more authentic than the Tikhlal or whatever Temani Nusak you're using. I mean, we went straight to the source, more Rav Sadigon and Rambam. But apart from just sourcing all the areas in the Mishnah that mention prostrating, I developed a Siddur with Yosef Aliyah. So my friend Yosef, he's probably the main individual who started a movement for prostration awareness in the Jewish world. I don't know if you've seen his videos, but he's the guy who comes out prostrating a lot, right? So he didn't just make these things up. He spent over 10 years in the Yemenite community in Jerusalem and learned from actual Dordaim, I mean, people that could trace their lineage back to that segment in Yemen. So yes, within many of the positions mentioned in our Siddur, there's Masorah. It's not necessarily all sourced out in the Mishnah, but it's not stuff that we made up. And I think that we have the only Siddur on the market that does that. Mind you, Karaites do. Yeah. Karaites, I've been to the Karaite synagogue in Jerusalem. Like in the Old City, there's a Karaite synagogue, and I believe they do prostrate there. I mean, Jews prostrate, Orthodox Jews prostrate. I mean, during Yom Kippur.
But not regularly throughout the year. That's kind of more of an awkward position during Yom Kippurim than anything.
Right. I mean, nowadays it feels that way. It definitely feels that way nowadays. But this was common knowledge, especially with anyone who studied the Rambam. I mean, the Rambam, it's black and white there. That prostration is the preferable way. Now, like, if you can prostrate, you still fulfill your obligation. But I wouldn't, in this day and age, die on that mountain. In other words, that we have bigger fish to fry. I know guys who are very capable of being very influential, bringing people to Torah, this and that, but they'll take up a cause like polygamy, right? And I'm saying, okay, anyone who knows even a little bit of Torah knows that, of course, it's allowed. The Rambam says that you could have up to 4 wives, the Rabbanan, unlimited wives, the Raita, right? I mean, it's nothing new, but they push this so much that it completely discredits them. Right, and it gets people to write them off as kooks, and it's
and you have to be well rounded, and that's what I appreciate about what
you have to pick your battles correctly.
Yeah, and you have to pick your battles. I mean, all of those things I definitely agree with.
I know people who do it. I know, but it's not published, and the people who have been here. Look, in the Orthodox world. And this is known in the Orthodox world, it's practiced in a different way. Well, sort of. There used to be a website called Pelegish Personals. So a Pelegish is a concubine. It's really not clear the ins and outs of that world, of the world of having a concubine. The Rambam said it's limited to kings. Some other rabbis say that it's beneficial and that you should go ahead and do it. So regardless, what guys would do if they just want to sleep around with their girlfriend is just take them to the mikveh. Just go to the mikveh, and supposedly in uptown Manhattan, there's mikvahs that allow single women to go in, and they just sort of, those guys just slept around with girls, right, and just called them their concubines. There's a lot of weird stuff. Also, in Israel, polygamy, I remember there was a group in Israel that practiced it, but Israel outlawed polygamy. However, in 1956, when the big influx of Jews came from the Arab world, many of them came with multiple wives. So Israel
has a lot of Yemenite
allowed them to keep their wives, but didn't allow them to attain any more. It's not for me. It's not. But it's
not for everybody, But it's like you said, it's one of those things, and we. And we take all of these elements from the Torah, from the written Torah, and from the oral Torah, and we put it together and present a case for righteous living. And when we started coming this way, we immediately saw the benefit, just like Joshua states, and the Torah states, that if you do these commandments, you will be prosperous in all that you do. And so we've seen benefit after benefit after benefit, even when we weren't, as observant as we wanted to be that day or that week or even that year. Our drive to continue, learning about, Okay, what prayers are taken out this day? Okay, what did we insert this day? All right, cool. Let's implement it. Okay, now the whole, the kitchen has to be kosher. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, let's change our diet. And then we see the benefit of that. And, if we can get away from a lot of the, like you said, the hot button issues and look at the benefits of just Torah life in general, whichever aspects of Torah you want to apply to your life, obviously, we want to apply as many mitzvot as possible. But, whatever you, decide to really take up and take from the God of Israel in your walk, I mean, you're going to see that benefit no matter who you are.
So one thing people probably don't know about me is that I'm a big advocate for modern Orthodoxy. Not too modern. I'm not a liberal, and I'm not pushing a YCT and open Orthodoxy agenda. But I am for a YU, Yeshiva University style modern Orthodox Judaism, and I think that's the healthiest form of original Judaism. So, I mean, I'll tell you, like I tell everyone, don't burn yourself out. Don't. You're only human. And if you take the advice of most rabbis who teach online, they're going to make you into a fanatic. And it's going to be difficult for you. It's going to be difficult for your family.
Sure.
Just like the Rambam teaches, take the middle road. Don't be firmer than the Pope. I mean, nowadays it's all fear, gloom and doom Judaism. And if you do this, you're going to get punished. You do this. No, just relax. Just take it easy. Right? And we have a principle, Safek de Rabbanan lehakel, that if there's anything that you have a question on in the rabbinic world, we're commanded to be lenient on. Safek de right to l'chumra, that if there's a question on something from the Torah, you're strict on. But the vast majority of issues in your life aren't going to be Torah issues. They're going to be more rabbinic issues. So we take the lenient road. And like that, you'll last longer in the religion, and that you won't make it impossible for everyone around you.
I really appreciate it because, and that's kind of where we fell off with very understanding because, there is no room for leniency in a lot of things. What do you do on the Sabbath when, your child is sick or your wife is sick? So there's something in me. You can't go. Let's wait it out as long as we can. And you're putting your like you said, you're putting your family at a disadvantage. So there's got to be some type of leniency. There's got to be some type of oral instruction on what happens, in an emergency. We just had the hurricanes down here, got Texas. So that was pretty crazy. And so what do you do in those cases? And we have seen that we can still be upright with the Creator throughout all of these ups and downs that we see in life. So I really appreciate all of your efforts. They've helped me in my observance, in my practice, and even you have a few little debate tips and stuff that you might say, oh, that may have came from me. But yeah, man, it's really good. I wouldn't trade it in for anything. I really wouldn't. And my name, I changed my name, so I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm going to just have to live this thing out. I'm not going to. I'm not going back to Bob Smith. So
what I try to do is get people to talk about issues, and I usually talk about things most people don't talk about. And I think this dialogue between both of us will get people to talk, and ask questions, and